Hello everyone, I'm Steven from X-Kurogane Blog and Photography. Today I'm going to walk you guys through my latest figure photography project, Pulchra's 1:7 scale Marie Antoinette from 5th Grand Order. Before I proceed with detailing my props, I'm going to talk about this figure for a little bit. So yeah, this is a 1:7 scale figurine of Marie Antoinette from Pulchra, which was released way back in year 2017. This is the only figurine of her in existence. No one else, no other figure companies made her figure. The figure itself is actually okay, acceptable considering the amount I paid for. Not very detailed, especially her hair. The sculpt is not very detailed. The painting is just flat with no weathering or shading. But the one thing I couldn't understand is that there are just random paint spots or paint transfers on her back. And where did they come from? I have no idea. So this is just one of those random quality control issues that are known to Pulchra. Now we move on to the prop itself. This base right here I prepared for this figurine. Okay, first thing regarding the base and the idea behind, I wanted to make a forest. So the landscape, the ground needs to resemble that in a forest. Very uneven and rocky terrain mixed with soil. So the first thing I would have to do is to create an uneven terrain with a styrofoam. This is a large sheet of styrofoam about 24 by 24 inches or 60 by 60 centimeters, large enough for a 50mm lens on a camera to cover. About 1.5 or 2 inches thick. And why does it have to be thick? It is because I'm going to literally melt the styrofoam and create an uneven terrain. So to create an uneven terrain, I'm taking advantage of the fact that normally we do not use lacquer or any oil-based paint on the surface of styrofoam because it will literally melt the styrofoam. Chemical reaction. So I took advantage of that fact by spraying thinner all over the surface of this sheet of styrofoam, and I watched it start melting. And I end up with an uneven terrain. It is as simple as that. So since I'm going to create an uneven terrain, I'm going to melt it. The styrofoam had to be thick in the first place, or I will just end up perforating everything. And then there are 4 sections on the side here, elevated sections which are a bit like a rocky terrain, and then trees will be going out of it. So the lower terrains in the middle are like walkways for Mary to walk through. These elevated areas are where you will see trees going out of it. These 4 elevated terrains are actually not completely hand sculpted. It's just partially hand sculpted by me on the side with a normal pen knife, but it originated from an aquarium foam rock. So here's an example. This is the rock foam you see people place inside their aquariums as an artificial background. I've used this before in one of my previous photography projects involving Aniplex Ereshkigal, also from 5th Grand Order. I used this to make the underworld, but I didn't really make a video on that. So that same sheet of PU rock foam, polyurethane, they're made of polyurethane, I sliced into 4 sections and hot glued them on all corners, creating a walkway in the middle. And then after that, on the styrofoam surface, I would just cover it with plaster of Paris, right? White plaster, cover the styrofoam surface and wait for it to set. And then I can spray paint a base layer of color, maybe brown mixed with olive green. And then for the next level of detailing, I will mix artificial sand with PVA glue, also known as latex glue or carpenter's glue. Mix artificial sand, and I will cover it across the entire walkway with the artificial sand. After the PVA glue sets in the next day, the sand will be nicely and hardly glued onto the surface. And then I would repeat the same thing with artificial moss and grass, as well as all these fine details, artificial grass or plant models. Sometimes you can buy them from gardening stores. So I also use silicone glue, transparent silicone glue in some cases, just to glue the moss onto these pits a little bit easier and they won't be noticeable. And then for the trees, I only made the tree trunks. The branches are totally not important, it's unnecessary, because we'll be photographing the lower area of the diorama, right? The figurine is about 27 centimeter tall, and the background you would need to photograph a 27 centimeter tall figure is about minimum 40 centimeters. So I 3D printed these tree trunks with about 39 centimeters of height. I already knew how much I would need, but the figure is only around 27, and you have about 10 or 12 centimeters of additional leeway to frame your photo. And if I were to 3D print a tree trunk like this, multiple units of them, it would get really expensive because this is a very substantial amount of material. But if you 3D print in vase mode, there's a special mode in 3D printers in the software actually called the vase mode, and what this special mode does is that it will just print a very thin outline, leaving the center part completely hollow. So when you print a model that is completely hollow in the middle, you save a lot of material and printing time. So I was able to make 7 or 8 tree trunks just by printing in vase mode. But in the end, I only needed 3 or 4 for the photography process. But it is always better to over-prepare rather than under-prepare and discover that you do not have enough during photography. So these tree trunks, when you print them in vase mode, you're going to see layer lines all over the place. So I resurfaced them with a material similar to plaster of Paris, which these are cellulose fillers for filling walls, crack in walls. I use it to cover the entire surface of the 3D print and to hide any print flaws, in the 3D print model. So doing this will eliminate or destroy the fine details in the 3D print surface, but that is completely fine because the trees are not the main subjects, not the main point of the photo. So it is okay for them to be a bit less detailed. After I've covered them with cellulose filler surface and the material has set, just spray paint the whole thing and they'll be ready for photography. And then there is this horse right here. This horse is actually a part of Marie Antoinette's noble phantasm. She is a rider servant, so naturally she'll be riding something. And as for this horse, it originated from a 3D printing website, 3D file sharing website to be precise, called thingiverse.com. And I prepared this for printing at a 1:7 scale, which would demand 60 hours of non-stop printing. A very demanding task because 3D prints can go wrong anytime mid-print. After you have printed for 24 hours maybe, something goes wrong, you have to throw away the half-printed model. A big waste of materials and your time. Fortunately, the print went through, but removing the supporting structures was really tough. It took me several hours to do it. It was printed with a transparent material, so because I wanted light to shine through so that the horse would glow slightly during photography with my lighting set up. This thing went straight for painting with an airbrush and it turned out fantastic. So these blue colored crystals, they are made from epoxy resin, or also known as AB resin. At the bottom of these models, I drilled a hole inside so that blue colored LEDs could be inserted to make them glow in the dark. along the terrain of this part, I drilled holes along the walkway, along the path where Marie will be standing in, and inserted LEDs where the wire will go through the bottom, which they are connected directly to 9-volt batteries. So that is how I light up the crystals in the dark. Now to the photography part. I wanted this forest scene to be photographed under a night setting instead of a daytime setting. One of the reasons is more to color theory, where I've explained it in my previous videos before. Basically, you want to match the colors of your main subject, your figure, with a suitable background color. And in this case, Marie is kind of red color all over the place, and red goes really well with blue color contrasting. So naturally, the first thing that comes to mind would be a night scene. But to be fair, forest is mostly green color, and green is considered a cold color, so theoretically, a daytime scene would also go well with Marie Antoinette. But I picked a night scene simply because I do not have a suitable daytime forest background for this setup. I do have a very nice nighttime background. Which brings us to this printed background wallpaper. So I do have a bunch of these background wallpapers. They are actually made of cloth, so they are semi-transparent. They can transmit light. And then we move on to the main lighting setup for the main figurine. I used 2 light sources for this figure since there really is no need for 3 or more lights, because this is a figure with a very simple pose, and 2 lights usually can give enough exposure for the figurine. Not to mention, I need to keep the lighting only on the figurine. The lighting should not spill into the surroundings because it is a night scene. You do not want a scenario which is supposed to be dark. A night scene is supposed to be dark in a forest, yet you have a very bright trees or grass and foliage. We don't want that to happen. We made the main figurine bright just because it is a part of photography itself. It is a rule to have a well-exposed main character. In order to restrict your lighting onto the main subject only and not spill into the surroundings, there are 2 ways to do it. The first way is to use a snoot, and the second way is to use slit lighting. Now, I have described slit lighting before. Basically, you use a narrow cutout, a long and thin cutout. It can be made of a cardboard, you can DIY, and you place it in front of a light source. So you get a very narrow beam of light that will hit a very limited amount of area. In this case, only the figure. The light should not spill into the foliage at the side or the tree trunk itself. I've also made a video on this slit lighting technique previously. You can check it in my photography tutorial of Rider. And okay, the second one will be a snoot. This is what you call a snoot. So this light modifier is actually designed for camera flash, as you can see from the back. It is shaped to mount a camera flash, and with just some creativity, you can use it on a regular light bulb as well. A snoot is basically just a barrel that restricts the light so that it would not spray white, and spread to the other area. So I use this snoot to focus the light beam onto the figurine only. My second set of this quad lighting system, I mounted it inside a large 90cm light box to light up the background, the forest itself. So yeah, I inserted 3 bulbs inside, 2 small ones and a large one, though I did not need to turn on all of them because it is a night scene. You do not want it to be too bright. And I place it behind the fabric background, and you will have a nighttime forest just that easy. So there are 3 light sources: the background, the forest, and 2 in front, both for the figurine. The rest are accessory lights, the LEDs. which are to light up the crystals to add some bling factor, some wow factor to the photograph. And yes, this transparent horse, I needed it to be lighted up, to glow slightly, just to make the shot look a bit better. And I ended up taping an LED, battery LED on the back of the horse. It's just a really lame method of doing so. This battery powered LED, I just taped it behind the horse with masking tape. But as long as it works, it doesn't matter. But by doing so, because the light bulbs are focused on one specific area of the horse, the lighting will be a bit uneven, but that is completely fine because I did not want to drill multiple holes into this horse model and insert LEDs within the model, because I did not want to damage this model. In future, it might be displayed in events, in exhibitions. As for the camera settings I used, it is my usual. I do it all the time, the same thing. Lowest base ISO value. That is native, right? It needs to be a native value. So on most cameras, it is ISO 100. For my Nikon D850, it is ISO 64. So I stick with ISO 64. And I use a very slow shutter speed. In this case, this is a very dark scene. I need to get it bright enough. At an aperture of f2.8 would be about a quarter of a second, 1/4 second. If I bring it down to f4, it would be half a second. And with my usual workflow, I tend to do f2.8 on a 50mm Sigma Art lens, and I would do focus shifting. In this case, I bracketed for around 50 or 60 shots from foreground all the way to the entire horse, covering an entire horse, and I will do focus stacking later. And this is what the result looks like. As you can see, the foreground, the crystals, the grass, the details, they are all in focus together with the figurine. And this normally wouldn't be possible with a single shot, even if you use a very small aperture of f5.6, f8, right? 5.6 or f8, you will not get everything in focus anyway. So I had to focus stack to improve the detail of the scene. At the same time, I can maintain a very nice blurry bokeh, blurry background. So that is the main purpose of focus stacking, though I will only do that for one single shot in a series of photos for a photography project, because the process is just too complex, right? Sometimes to focus stack a single stack of photos to produce one single result, you would need 1.5 to 2 hours, including manually correcting some areas that the software stacked or edited wrongly. All the manual corrections, it can take up to 2 hours sometimes for a single photo. That is about it for this specific photography setup, this specific photography project. Marie Antoinette from Fate's Grand Order. It is a part of my ongoing personal project where I want to cover as many FGO characters as possible. This is just one of them. And yeah, until then, I'll see you guys again. Hopefully you guys learned something from today's video. Thank you for watching. Please do like and subscribe, and goodbye.